Web browsers are a piece of software. So I'm going to go through a few slides and try and explain some things graphically, and then we'll take a look at what web browsers look like on my screen so that you can get an idea of what the differences are between them and what they really do. So web browsers are applications. They're software that do things on your computer or smartphone or tablet. So just like Microsoft Word is an application right here in the lower right, a web browser is an application and it does things for you. It's just that it confuses a lot of people because they're not sure what they're doing when they use a web browser. But I'm going to try and explain that to you as best I can, and hopefully we'll get a good understanding. Okay, you're all probably familiar with a layer cake. At some point in your life, you have either encountered one, eaten one, or made one. Most people have. And a layer cake has three layers: a bottom layer, a middle layer, and a top layer. They can be the same or they could be different, couldn't they? But the middle layer has to sit on top of the bottom and the top has to sit on the middle. And then you can have some extra toppings. This was a pretty good picture I found. And technology kind of works the same way. When you have hardware, think of that as your bottom layer, the computer you use, the phone you use, the tablet you use. That's the hardware, and it's not real smart by itself. But some really good people and some bright companies and some bright people have developed something called an operating system that runs and sits on top of hardware. It's software, and every time you power up your computer, when you turn on your phone, when you restart your tablet, you load an operating system on your computer that runs on the hardware. And applications work with the operating system so that the operating system does a lot of things. So you can have multiple windows open, you can print something, we can run Zoom and receive email at the same time. We can have voice and video going on. So the operating system takes care of managing a lot of those little tasks. It's like a juggler. If you've seen an act where somebody spins dishes on poles in a nightclub act or something like that, that's what an operating system is doing. And the applications are the individual plates. But this is the typical way that technology people like to represent applications, operating systems, and hardware is like a layer cake. So the challenge, of course, is that there's a lot of different types of cakes out there, right? So if you think of Apple Macs as one type of layer and HP, Dell as another layer, your iPhone and iPad as another layer, your Samsung or LG as another layer, those are different pieces of hardware. But on top of Apple Macs runs Mac OS. And on top of HP, Dell's, etc., runs Windows 10. On top of your iPhone and iPad runs iOS. And on top of your Samsung or LG phone or tablet runs Android. So these are different features that take place in different layers. The challenge for a lot of people is that the reason web browsers are not thought of as an application is because they are often included with the operating system software. It's an application. So Safari is included with Mac OS. Edge, which is Microsoft's new browser, is included in Windows 10. Safari is also included in iOS for iPhones and iPads, and Chrome is included with Android. And to make it even more complicated, you can install any web browser that will work on your operating system. And there's another popular one out there that's used by a lot of technology people because they like to use it for programming features, but it's a good browser. It's called Mozilla Firefox. It's not owned by a company. It's created by a community of people, and so as a result, it's an open source piece of software. And the challenge now is that you don't have to have a Mac that only runs Safari. I was able to install Edge on my Mac and Chrome on my Mac and Firefox on my Mac. I was able to install Safari on my Windows 10. I was able to install Chrome on Windows 10. I'm able to install all of these browsers on any of these operating systems. So it's a choice you can make as to which browser you choose to use. You don't have to use the one that comes standard with the operating system that you're using. Okay, so that's what browsers are. They have a basic function. Web browsers are applications that open web page files. So if you have a Microsoft Word file, which ends in the .docx extension, that's called the file extension, and you wanted to open up a Microsoft Word file, you would use the Microsoft Word application to open the file, and then you would be able to see the document on your computer, and you could edit or review it or make changes to it. That's what Microsoft Word does. It opens up .docx types of files and lets you manipulate them and change them and create them. Web browsers let you open up web page files that usually end in an extension called .html, and that stands for Hypertext Markup Language. It's an industry standard, and so it's very easy for a web page browser like Chrome or Safari or Edge or Firefox to open up a web page. Now, you don't edit the HTML with a web browser unless you're a developer, and you have privileges to do that. 99% of the time, when you use your web browser, you're just going to view the document or the web page, and the web page file gets moved to your computer by the web browser. So just like you use Word to open up Word documents, you use web browsers to open up web pages. What happens is that web pages are not usually on your computer. They're usually somewhere on the internet. So when you type something on your keyboard and you're using your web browser and you're using the search bar to type something in, your web browser goes out to the internet, makes a request, finds the web page file for you, and then brings it back and displays it on your computer. And it happens in less than a second or two. And so it's just like a miracle of technology that people have invented this. Your web browser fetches and retrieves web pages. It's like that really, really well-trained dog, that you throw the bone or you throw the ball and it fetches it and retrieves it and brings it back to you all the time. But in this case, the ball is the web page that you're looking for on the internet. That's what it does. So that's what web browsers do. You type something in, it goes to fetch it, and it brings it back to you. And it does that every time you visit a web page. Now, there's some tools in your web browser that you may or may not be familiar with. And we're going to take a look at just 3 of them. Web browsers are software applications, and just like you probably know that Microsoft Word or Excel or PowerPoint or Keynote or your video editor or whatever application you use has a lot more features than you ever are going to learn how to use. Web browsers do have a lot of features that you might end up never using. And so it's like having a set of kitchen utensils. You may never use all of them, but they're available if you ever need them. But the 3 most common things that people take advantage of with web browsers is the search and address box. It's the blank box where you type in typically a search term or an address. And what sometimes can be confusing is that the actual box serves 2 purposes. It is both a search and an address box. You can type in the address of a web page or copy and paste a URL, which is the Uniform Resource Locator, that is the address of a web page, and it'll go out and get it, or it'll just return search results, whichever you choose to do. Now, you can also use tabs. Tabs are a way of having multiple web pages open in your web browser. And I'll show you some tabs on desktops. We're going to look at desktops and laptops today and full-size pages, not mobile views because they're actually a little bit different. And then we're going to look at bookmarks and favorites. That's a way of saving, just like if you were reading a book and you wanted to remember where you had a place saved in that book, you'd put a bookmark there or fold a page over. That's what bookmarks are called. And just for your information, Microsoft calls bookmarks favorites, but they really mean the same thing. It's a way of saving a frequently visited website so that you don't have to type it in all the time. So one of the things I wanted to mention was that the mobile view of websites can be different from the full screen view. And a full screen is generally displayed on a desktop, a laptop, and a tablet. Typically, tablets will display web pages full screen view as opposed to what's called a mobile view. You don't have to do anything to make this happen. It's the website that makes it happen. So if you go to my website, for example, and use a smartphone to access it, you will get a view that looks like this. If you go on a desktop or a laptop, you will get a view that looks like this. The navigation is typically in the a drop-down list that you access by tapping on this. Websites that have both a mobile and desktop view are a little easier to navigate because the mobile view is more oriented towards using the finger pointer, that's your mouse, as opposed to the pointer and your arrow, which you might have on your desktop or laptop. So it's just a little more convenient for navigation, but the information is there. It's just going to be a different navigation tool. And Google prioritizes in search results websites that do have both a mobile and a desktop view, particularly when you're using a smartphone. So it's an important tool for marketers and website owners to make sure, but they're responsible for doing this. You don't have to do anything as a user. I've got a lot of things open here. I've got a number of browsers. So hopefully you should be able to see Bobology on the left and Bobology on the right. Everybody see that okay? Good. All right. There's actually 4 browsers I have open on my desktop. So I'm using a Mac, and I'm going to switch to a PC as well. But on my Mac, as you know, there's something called the toolbar. And at the bottom, here's Safari, here's Chrome, here's Firefox, and here's Microsoft Edge. I was able to install them all on my Mac. Now, I don't need to. Okay, and you don't need to either. It's just that I'm doing this for a purpose of demonstration. So I've got 2 browsers open on my desktop, and the question is, does the website look a whole lot different or not from one browser to another? And I don't think it does. Can anyone tell what browser I've got over here on the left at all? And can anyone tell what browser I've got on the right?
The one on the right is Safari.
The one on the right is Safari. Okay.
On the left is Chrome.
The one on the left is what? Anybody have a guess on that?
Chrome.
Chrome? Okay. You're wrong, both of you. Now, don't feel bad. Okay. The one on the right is actually Chrome, or maybe it's the other way on what you view, but on my right, the one I'm pointing to right now with my cursor, and let me annotate this a little bit. So if I'm annotating this one, this is actually Chrome. This one is Safari. Web pages just don't look different in different browsers. They just don't look different. But this is Safari, and the reason I can tell it's Safari, I recognize it a little bit, but if you look in the upper left here on my toolbar, it'll tell me that I have Safari open. If I switch over to Chrome, it tells me I've got Chrome open. And that's about the only way you can really tell a lot of things about browsers. Now, if I go to a couple of other browsers, I've got some other here. This is Microsoft Edge. And if I compare my website side by side and I look at the views here, I'm going to click on this again here. This is Safari. Let me go to Edge. Here's Edge. There's just not a lot of difference in terms of how a web page looks. Maybe just a slight difference in the boldness of the font here is all. That's about the only difference. But web pages and the standards on the internet are set up so that they are designed so that web pages look virtually identical from one web browser to another. Let me see if I've got Firefox up here. Firefox is up here on the right, and it's a little bit different because it has a dark background on the top, but I can see I'm using Firefox here, but the web page looks pretty identical. So why would you want to use a different browser? Well, it's because browsers sometimes connect to other services in the cloud so that you can synchronize information between different devices. So most people start out using Apple devices with their iPhone. And if you start using an Apple device and you start using the built-in browser, which is Safari, then if you're using Microsoft Edge on your Windows PC, you might save a web page in a bookmark or a favorite on Safari, but it's not going to be available on Edge because it's a different browser. So Microsoft and Apple give you the ability to download whatever browser you prefer using. You can download Edge to your iPhone. You can download Safari to your desktop. They're available for you to use. Or you can say, I'm just going to use Google Chrome across all of them and synchronize bookmarks and other information as well. Let's take a look at Google search. Now, so let me point out a few things. This is the search and address bar at the top on Firefox. This is the search and address bar on the top of Microsoft Edge. I had to check. Okay. This is what it looks like on Safari, the search and address bar. And somewhere in here, I've got Chrome. Here's Chrome. This is what it looks like on Google Chrome. But they all serve the same function. You can type in a website address, or you can do a search from the search bar. So if I want to search Google, I can go to Google, but if I want to search from the search bar, I can type in a search. So we used the keywords last week. Let me type in flowers, okay? And if I type in flowers in the address bar, it goes and it uses, in Chrome, I'm using Google search, and it pulls up search results. If I switch over to Safari, Apple does not make a search engine. So if I do a search from Apple Safari, it will use Google for search. Okay, so it automatically uses Google search, and hopefully I got virtually the same, but it's kind of interesting. There's actually a couple of arrangements. If you compare one page to another, there's a few things. They're just different order here. So there's the box from Pro Flowers. There's a couple of different ones. So you might get slightly different results on a different browser because different browsers track your history a little bit differently. So let's go to Microsoft Edge. Okay, so if I do a search here and I type in flowers, you'll notice right here it says it's going to use Bing search. That's because Microsoft made the Edge browser, and Microsoft has a search engine called Bing. So if I type in and hit the Enter key now, the search results are going to be a little bit different. Okay, so instead of, I didn't type in right, so let me type it in correctly. That will make sense. So if I type in flowers here for Bing, and it will produce different search results. These are ads as well as search results that people have paid to Bing, not to Google. So you can see this little B here tells you you're using Bing instead of On Google, I used, on Chrome, I used Google. On Apple, I used Google. So the search engine can be different from your web browser. And that's one of the points I wanted to make is that when you're using a web browser, you are accessing different web pages. One of those pages can be a search engine so that you can utilize whichever search engine you want to. Now, what is interesting is Microsoft gave me a little announcement that popped up when I installed Microsoft Edge that said Microsoft might make an affiliate commission for referring you to a web page that they display. In this case, we can see this is an ad. This is an ad. There's a tiny little marker here. This is an ad. So Microsoft displays, just like Google does, a lot of ads for web page results, regardless of what you type in. So Bing is going to give you Bing preferred uses versus Google preferred uses. If I just make this web page address bar blank and I just hit enter, nothing really will happen. So that if I have to have a search result, an entry in this address bar, but I can delete what's in there and type in something different if I want to, like Seal Beach, for example. And we'll see different results. I will see Bing results here because it's using the Bing search tool. I will see in Chrome, I'll see Google results. Safari does let you change what search engine you use, and Chrome does, and Bing does as well, and Mozilla does. So they all have the ability for you to choose not only what search engine you use, but most people aren't going to make a change. And that's what they count on, is that most people are going to use the software that came with their device, whether it's a desktop or a smart laptop or a smartphone or a tablet, and they're going to use what came in there for doing things. Okay, so it's a Safari. It will give me the ability to look at it, and I can view my history here. So it'll see recently closed. I actually had a problem with when I looked at Edge as part of my Mac update, and so I updated this. Here's some things about what are keywords from YouTube that I was doing, so you can show all the history, and that's where you'd find it in your history. So here's Chrome, and Chrome just has history right up here. The search bar and history are kept, and then bookmarks are also kept. So if I look at bookmarks, these are all the bookmarks that I've had that I've saved, and I save way too many. But that's in Firefox, but I save bookmarks differently in Google, and I save bookmarks differently in Chrome, and I save them a little bit differently on Safari as well. So they'll look a little different across because I use them for different times and different issues. Generally, I work with Safari, and what will happen is that the people that make the operating system, like Apple, they want you to use Safari because they are able to integrate you more with the Apple system of software. Google will want you to use Chrome across all your devices. And sometimes they make it easier for things to be done, like Google has a really good plugin, for example, for Zoom and for scheduling with Google Calendar in Chrome. Whereas Safari might have features that make it easier to work with iPhone or Apple apps. And so they just want you to try and use more of their software and to help make it easier for them to keep you working with their tools and technologies. But the browsers come with the operating systems. And some people just don't want to use something from a company like Microsoft, Apple, or Google, and they will go to a very popular resource like Mozilla for Firefox, which is an open source tool. They all will do the same thing. They all let you browse the web. They all let you do search. They all let you save bookmarks. They all let you view the history. And so they all do a lot of those common things. They do more advanced features as well, but I didn't want to get into them today specifically. You would go to do a search for your browser, or I did a search for Microsoft Edge. You can do a search for Google Chrome, and you can do a search for Mozilla Firefox or Safari. And you want to make sure that you go to the site that is owned by the company. So you'd want to make sure that your browser, for if you wanted to download Apple, for example, Safari, it's relatively easy. It's easiest when you first install the software, because then they typically have pop-up messages. Do you want to import bookmarks from another browser? And so when you do that's easiest to do. But typically you'll find, like in Firefox, for example, which I have open on the right, um, there's a bookmarks, but there might be some preferences that allow you uh, to install and to migrate bookmarks. Typically, there are some things in tools or other areas. You might have to look a little bit or go to help to say, how do I import my bookmarks from Google Chrome to Firefox? And I'm sure there's lots of help tools out there for it. But you don't have to do it when you first install it. You can do it later on, and it'll import them all for you. Typically across all the browsers, they'll give you the ability to import them from whatever other browser you use. DuckDuckGo is a privacy-focused type of web browser. So DuckDuckGo is both a search engine and a web browser tool, so that when you're using DuckDuckGo, you do not do search on Google or Bing. You do search through DuckDuckGo, and they basically don't track you, is what happens. So that they're going to let you know if you if a cookie wants to be installed. They're going to let you know if things are tracked. And in Apple's newest version of Safari, they put in some privacy tools for that. In Mozilla Firefox does have a lot of privacy tools, because Mozilla Firefox tends to be used by people that don't want to be, necessarily beholden to Chrome or Microsoft or Apple, and so they'd rather support that independent. But you can use DuckDuckGo as a web browser, or you can use it as a search tool. In fact, Safari allows you to change what you actually use for search. And you can change this default search tool as opposed to just always being Google when you type something in, because I can go to the DuckDuckGo website or I can install it, and so DuckDuckGo basically can be used as a search engine for you instead of Google or Bing. Not really much difference in terms of safety, but it's more private as opposed to tracking what you do and where you go. Because one of the advantages and disadvantages of using free software and free searches is that they keep track of what you do when you use them. So DuckDuckGo doesn't track your behavior and doesn't share it with anybody. You'll get different search results using DuckDuckGo than you do using Google or Bing, because they typically they won't track you, but you'll get ads, but you just won't get tracked. Recognizing, first of all, web browsers are software apps. Your operating system includes one. You can install others. All they do is retrieve and display web pages. The search and address bar are going to be the same. Tabs make it fast to switch between pages. so that it's faster to do that. If you have tabs, you can have more than one tab opener. You can use bookmarks and favorites to find pages again or your history. And keep in mind that your mobile and desktop views are going to be different. Now, next month in October, because I'm an iPhone user, I'm going to cover using Safari on an iPhone. But you can see all we've really done is just touch on what web browsers can do on desktops today. But they're really, really applications that we make use of all the time. So understanding how we use them is really important more and more all the time. That's what I wanted to hope to accomplish today, was get you more familiar with the fact that you're using a piece of software that is there with a lot of tools that are available for you to take advantage of. Have a good weekend. As if I don't see you on Zoom Tales, I'll see you next week. Thanks for participating. Appreciate
Thank
it.
you.